Good morning, Judge Bisha.
Good morning. Hi, Jane.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning, everybody. I am here with, or will be here with Director Wood from TCJS when he gets on.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Judge.
Um,
Good morning, everyone, and welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
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 All right, it's 9 o'clock, so we'll call this meeting of the Judicial Commission on Mental Health to order. It's our second meeting of 2024. If you missed the January meeting, it's available online, and I encourage you, if you're a commissioner and missed the meeting, to go and sort of find the informational items that are of interest to you and look at them offline. We have a number of new commissioners, and we took some time for everybody to introduce themselves. So if you get a chance, take a look. So the business meeting this morning will be the first half of the meeting, and then we are going to have a longer presentation from Justice Bill Boyce, who's the vice chair of the commission and is also the chair of our legislative research committee. And they've been hard at work on developing legislative proposals for this committee to hear about, comment on. And so we'll have presentations from Justice Boyce and Professor Shannon from Texas Tech, who is an integral part of mental health law in Texas, and just a shout out to Professor Shannon and Collaborative Counsel, Justice Evelyn Keyes. They have really spearheaded a program or a project to get the American Law Institute interested in developing a model mental health law plan, whether that's in the form of a compendium of model laws or some other kind of project. It has been greenlighted to go to the project council meeting. These things move like glaciers at the national level, but the fact that they have developed expertise in this is being recognized, and Professor Shannon's being recognized nationwide. And Justice Boyce, Judge Hervey, Christie, a number of the staff have all been interested in helping develop a national platform where mental health law can be discussed and developed. So congratulations to Professor Shannon and everyone else. In addition, we're going to have Ron Lucy, who is the Executive Director of the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities, make a presentation about the work that they do. And then we'll close with updates from our partner organizations who have updates to give. So that's sort of an overview of our agenda today. I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair and colleague, Judge Barbara Hervey, and to welcome you, and then we'll get started.
Thank you, Justice Bland. Good morning, everyone. You should have received a meeting notebook via email. Staff also dropped a link to the notebook in the chat. You'll find the agenda under tab 1. Behind tab 2, you will find a list of the members of the commission, executive committee, commissioners, and a collaborative council. The meeting minutes from the last commission meeting can be found under tab 3. Please let the staff know if you find anything that needs correction. The commission paralegal Cynthia Martinez spends a lot of time capturing all of your good work in these minutes. So please send her any links or notes that would help her make the minutes more useful. Behind tab 4 is our big picture budget that Patrick Passmore will discuss. Tab 5 is the most recent report to the commission that outlines our progress on projects and committees. Tab 6 includes 2 documents with announcements on the county mental health laws plan and a new tool from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We have set aside time for announcements from our collaborative council members. If you have an announcement, you have a few options. Please raise your hand, message Christy or another staff member, or drop an announcement in the chat, and we will call on you at the end of the meeting. We have a break planned at 10:15, but please feel free to step away as needed. Next, we'll hear from our executive director, Christy Taylor. Christy.
Thank you, Judge Hervey. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share screen. Okay, how's that? So I regret that I didn't get to be with you in person at the last meeting. So I'm glad to be here today. And the one benefit of an online meeting is that we can look more carefully at some of the slides that we usually share when we go in and do education in our community. So I wanted to just take a few moments and give you a small sample of what we do when we move into community. Well, we don't move, we go into communities and we do SIM mapping and the county mental health law plan. And sometimes we'll just be there for special education requests. So this is what we do. We start off by talking about who we are as a judicial commission, emphasizing that we are supported by both of the high courts in the state, that our mission is to engage and empower court systems and use collaboration, education, leadership with the ultimate goal of benefiting people with mental illness, substance use disorders, or intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we start off with a somber reality of that this really is all for people. we sometimes can get bogged down into the laws and the procedures that, data collection, things that can be very dry. And so while it is difficult, we like to start off and remind everyone that these are real people, real Texans who are affected by our systems. And so this is a slide from a report from the University of Texas School of Law Civil Rights Clinic and the Texas Jail Project, who are represented on our collaborative council. So someone on our staff noted that while these photos are difficult, that we really appreciate that these are photos from their real life, that these are not their photos from the worst day in their life when we see them in our courts and in our jails. And so we take a moment to remember why we're doing this and how important this work is that we're doing. But we don't want to end there, right? We want to go on to a hopeful note that we are all doing good. So we ask people to share, usually in our trainings, to think back to a day when they went that extra mile and what that great outcome was. So we move on to a more uplifting, hopeful stance. And I love this Ethiopian proverb that when the spider webs unite, that they can tie up a lion. And this sort of intractable, difficult societal problem that we are all addressing can definitely feel like a lion. So our next step is to look at how all of our individual pieces come together to create those successes. If some of our new commissioners or guests to the meeting have not heard of the sequential intercept model, this is what we're talking about. It is just a model to look at how all of the interventions that we're doing in our individual disciplines and sometimes silos can work together. It's a look at how someone originally with mental illness or substance use disorders move through the criminal justice system. This was developed by Policy Research Associates 25 years ago. So we have taken the liberty of adjusting it somewhat to fit the Texas model. But this is what all of our work is developed around. When we created the commission, we asked, how should we organize our work? What should our bench book look like? How do we tackle this beast? And all of the experts in the field said the sequential intercept model. So while it is a mouthful and sometimes can, be one of those concepts that's difficult to get your mind around at first, once you really get used to working with it, it's very helpful. I think it helps communities not feel as overwhelmed when you can see all of these interventions in a linear manner. So we lay this out and we ask folks to look at where they are in the sequential intercept model. And then if they're experiencing a SIM mapping, that is the sequential intercept model mapping, we actually walk through with the community how they're doing these interventions. And it helps point out where the gaps are, where they're doing things really well. I've heard some people say they get into these mappings or the county mental health law plan and find out we were doing more than we knew. We just didn't know we were doing it. So it was wonderful just to document the resources that we had and share those and come together and really improve and streamline the processes that were in place. So this is a look at the interventions that our experts on JCMH and our staff have brought together according to the sequential intercept model. And it's a lot. And this isn't even everything by far, right? These are just the main best practices that we've identified. So again, to try to simplify this, because we know that communities are not just dealing with mental health. They have so many different issues on their plate. We try to make it as easy as possible. So, for example, in the county mental health law plan and in other educational teachings that we do, we have grouped together some of our teaching into a civil intervention class that is, you can look and see more in the 0 and 1 intercept. And this would be emergency detention, court-ordered mental health services, and we do education about law enforcement and when it really is necessary that they have to arrest and the the discretion that they have to make different choices when it's appropriate. We then move on to early intervention, and this often focuses on magistration. 622 is, if you're not familiar, it's in the Code of Criminal Procedure. And really, Texas is lucky to have this law. It lays out how we should be trying to identify and documenting people that we suspect have mental illness. Then we can bring in whoever is contracted with the jail to take a closer look at these individuals and make sure that we're sharing that information with the appropriate parties when they move into the trial court, that their defense attorney has this information. And there are parties that are stated. We then move on and we look at specialty courts and talk about how you could create those, the ethical considerations. You'll hear more today about a program we did just for specialty courts. And then we have a class on competency restoration, which is, just another big group of information, I would say. It's challenging, but so important. So we take all of those and we put them together and have created a checklist that is our county mental health law plan. So the checklist is part of it. We forward that to accounting, ask them to do a self-assessment so that they can identify what parts of the law they're not doing well. And then also, I would say the county mental health law plan is easy to think about as a SIM 2.0. What we found is that when we were doing SIM mappings, the focus is on prevention, and it should be. So we spend that whole workshop a lot of times in the really early intercepts, and that makes perfect sense. But we're finding that we're not getting to those legal questions that a lot of our communities have. So the county mental health law plan, we started as a pilot program. We have 8 counties in it right now, and they have gone through 4 classes listed on this slide. We are now sharing those classes. The videos are on our website for 3. We are finishing up the 4th. There's CLE credit for those if you go back and watch them. And again, they are divided up like we just talked about. So our next step for county mental health law plan is to move into, I keep saying move, we're going to go into these communities and we're going to walk through that checklist with them and see where we can help refine those processes. So we are about to start that next month, and we're excited, and we'll report back on how that's going. The other thing we do when we're working with communities is share new resources. So very quickly, just a few resources that are highlighted behind tab 6. One is from BJA and the Council of State Governments. It is an interactive tool that helps communities or at the statewide level look at how are your collaboration structures, how are you collecting your data and working together to share that information when possible, and how are you aligning your funding to make sure that we are leveraging any federal funds, state funds, and that we're working together. So I encourage you to look for that, and we can send it out following the meeting in the minutes. So it actually has you go through and, it's one of those choose your own adventures. Depending on which question you answer and how you answer it, it will take you in different directions. Another new tool that we just found out about that isn't even in the notebook because we just got it this week is from the Treatment Advocacy Center. And Texas is highlighted in this book because we do have a law that allows us to do that, dismiss and transfer. Or in Texas, you don't even have to dismiss. But if it's a low-level offense that's nonviolent and has some particular criteria, you are able to transfer that over to a civil AOT program, the judge with probate jurisdiction. So this is a great new handbook for that. And so that is just a snippet of what we do when we do training, and wanted to share that with you. And now I think we're going to move on and hear from Patrick on our financial report. Any questions about any of that before we move on? Okay, great. And I foresee with the county mental health law plan that we will work with these 8 counties that we have, and then we are going to reassess and see if this is something that we would want to request funding for in the future from the legislature to expand that pilot and be able to work with more counties. Okay, Patrick.
Thank you, Christy. Good morning. I, like Christy, was unable to be with you all at the last in-person meeting, but I'm grateful that Gigi was able to provide you all with the financial update and introduce herself. So briefly, I'm Patrick Passmore. I'm the finance manager for the JCMH. I've been here since the beginning. Prior to joining the JCMH and still today, I serve in this same capacity for the Children's Commission and have been for the last 10 years. My primary responsibilities include our budget creation, financial reporting, grants management, and accounting and bookkeeping oversight. But that doesn't mean that I won't respond to travel-related questions or process payments. Gigi and I are a close team, and just depending on our individual workload at the time, we frequently will step in for each other. So moving on now, under tab 4 of the meeting notebook, you'll find our financial report as of April 1st. For those of you who are seeing this for the first or second time, that first table on the page represents the funding that the JCMH started the fiscal year with. The second table shows at a high level where we are as of April of 2024, with the first column representing our budget categories. The second, our expenses to date. Third is what we budgeted, and the fourth column is what remains to be expended through the remainder of the fiscal year. We're right on track. We are currently 60% of the way through our fiscal year 2024 and have 45% of our budget remaining. Finally, that last table on the page essentially puts the previous 2 tables together, our revenues and expenditures. And that final number that you'll see at the bottom, 7,322, is what remains unobligated at this time and what is anticipated to be carried forward to our 2025 revenues. So that was a lot. That was fast. If anyone has questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Gigi or the commission accounting email. We're pretty good about getting back to people fairly quickly. So that's all I have. Next up is going to be the JCMH Vice Chair and Chair of our Legislative Research Committee, Justice Bill Boyce, and Commissioner Professor Brian Shannon, and they were going to update us on the progress of the JCMH legislative proposals for the 89th legislative session.
Thank you, Patrick, and good morning to everyone. For those who are new to the commission, I will recap very briefly that part of the commission's role since its formation in 2018 has been to serve as an incubator of ideas and proposals for legislative additions or changes to improve the administration of justice for persons with mental illness or IDD. Across multiple sessions since the creation of the commission, we have made proposals, debated them internally, and presented them. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Professor Shannon to walk through at a high level the proposals that have been under discussion in recent months in anticipation of the upcoming legislative session. The process works that the Legislative Research Committee works up proposals. Oftentimes we'll have specific language or amendments in mind. We'll make an internal recommendation. That recommendation goes to the executive committee of the commission, which then determines the proposals that will be presented to the Texas Judicial Council. That is the body that is the administrative body overseeing the Texas judiciary. And ultimately, it is the Texas Judicial Council that will make a vote on which proposals will move forward, and that is its own process. So one takeaway from this introductory remark is that any discussion we have internally at the commission, either in this forum or in a committee forum, is a recommendation that ultimately will be looked at by the Judicial Council, looked at by the two high courts in determining what will be proposed to the legislature, which proposals will result in efforts to look for legislative sponsors in the House and the Senate, and so forth. And so one thing to keep in mind as we go through this today is that all input is welcome, but there are a variety of reasons why proposals may or may not advance. Sometimes you will see in the specifics that we're going to go through, some of these have been presented to the legislature previously, and for whatever reason, they didn't get out of committee or they didn't get support needed to advance. Sometimes a decision will be made to move on to another recommendation. Sometimes we'll take another swing at it and have another at bat and see if something will move forward. And so it's probably safe to say this is a dynamic process. And as part of that dynamic process, we certainly do value the input of all the folks who have worked on specific proposals. And I'm going to ask Professor Shannon to tick through some of those that have been most recently discussed at a legislative research committee meeting that was held Wednesday in anticipation of today's meeting. Professor Shannon.
Great, thanks, Justice Boyce, and welcome everybody. We backing up, kind of building on what Justice Boyce was talking about. We've got to work not very long after the Judicial Summit, so late fall of 2023, with starting to look at concepts that we'd approved last session that did not pass, but we thought 2 years ago had merit, and we wanted to examine whether we wanted to go forward with those anew, as well as an array of additional concepts that were brought to the larger committee's attention. The legislative full committee met early on, and then a smaller legislative work group got down and started digging through and doing some drafting on some various proposals. And then we had subgroups of those. So that work groups held several meetings, a lot of emails back and forth, different drafts flying back and forth, which led to Wednesday's legislative committee meeting that Justice Boyce described. And let me share screen here. I'll just give you a general summary of some of these concepts. So I'm hoping you're seeing the screen there with a document. Many thanks to Kama, who helped put this together. I've bunched them. The first group are provisions where we had, in effect, consensus, unanimity among the legislative work group and then committee. Some of those, as you see on the first few pages, are concepts that this legislative effort 2 years ago had approved. Just again, brief summaries. The first one is trying to create more emphasis on use of outpatient competency restoration or diversion to outpatient civil commitment for low-level offenses, Class Bs, and those Class A's that don't involve bodily injury or where there's no history of bodily injury. It also includes some refinements, I guess is the best word, for some of the definitions in the current code, particularly trying to give a functional definition of the phrase foreseeable future. Courts struggle with that. Attorneys struggle with that. The psychiatrists and psychologists who testify in these cases often struggle with that. And so what we mean through that is the period of restoration allowed under the statute. So why don't we say that? And so that's one of the things we're trying to do. The second one provides some clarifications to 46B084. This is the provision of what happens next after a defendant's competency has been restored and they're returned to the court, but later decompensate before the case can move forward. There are some gaps in that statute currently. Prosecutors and defense lawyers, as well as judges, have clamored for something besides guesswork to be included there. So this was from the last session. One we've tried for 2 sessions, and those of you who worked the legislature know it's a lot harder to pass a bill than to kill a bill. And so we've made efforts a couple of times on this concept, and we want to try again because we think it's the right thing to do. Competency restoration can only be ordered for Class B cases and up. Nonetheless, constitutionally, someone who is not competent to proceed shouldn't be tried even in a Class C case. So this creates a mechanism where the case could be dismissed if sought by the state in such a situation. Now, some new proposals that had consensus support, some clarifications to the current statutory form. This largely builds on the work in some of our counties where they've provided some supplements to help officers with providing more information that could be meaningful in the cases. And we thought this was a good idea. We also had a goal, though, not to exceed 2 pages for the form that our officers need to fill out. The next is one that was in part a recommendation from last session. It just didn't get over the finish line 100%. Legislation was passed last session to amend part of Chapter 573 to allow, in the case of an emergency detention with a warrant ordered by a court, that the officer that has executed that warrant and delivered the person to the facility, the officer need not stay for checking insurance information, for medical clearance and the like. The intent was to also have that recommendation apply in the warrantless emergency detention setting. And so we're trying to get that piece passed this session. The next is creating an opportunity for the potential for an outpatient step-down commitment for people who have IDD when the 46B competency restoration period has expired, the competency of the individual has not been restored, and then we're into Section 46B 103 proceedings with respect to the need for further commitment of the individual with IDD. It creates an outpatient alternative. The next provision, where again we had consensus, another new provision, is noting that under current law for jail-based competency restoration, it's not available for certain offenses, particularly those listed in 17032 and some under 42A 054. And so individuals charged with those offenses are some of the population that even though there might be space available on a JBCR list in a particular jail that has such a program, they aren't eligible and must sit there in the jail awaiting a bed at a forensic state hospital. Our thinking behind this is that the JBCR program is just as secure, perhaps more so than the secure hospital. And this would remove that limitation where there could then be an option for the local court to put this person or order this person into JBCR. We also have a provision to provide some clarifications to 16.23. That's the statute that directs law enforcement agencies to divert where possible. There was some language in the current statute that is somewhat less than clear in terms of talking about facilities, as opposed to, we know that we're not just talking about diversion facilities, but programs and the like. The next provision isn't really a bill in terms of bill language, but we have recommended that one of the priorities is to request funding for regional community diversion coordinators for counties that have executed a plan consistent with what Christy was sharing with us a bit ago. Now, we're a bunch of lawyers and judges, sometimes have different points of view. We don't necessarily always have 100% consensus. I know Justice Bland, Judge Hervey, they don't have a lot of 9-0 decisions, but there are some. And so what the committee did this week is looked at some of the concepts and had individual votes on provisions where there may not have been full consensus. These that are summarized below had 2/3 majority. The decision making then is going to be back within the executive committee of the JCMH about whether to send these forward or not, as Judge Boyce described, to the Judicial Council. One that we've tried for 2 different sessions, and the late great Dr. Floyd Jennings had made this recommendation to us 4 years ago, was to permit good time credits as a possibility when we're talking about individuals who've served in outpatient competency restoration. That law already exists for inpatient and jail-based competency restoration. Another provision that was a recommendation last session is some modifications to permit the deferral of arrest of an individual who has been brought into an ER or other mental health facility on an emergency detention, who then, while at the facility, commits acts that are chargeable for some type of non-trivial offense or significant property damage. And so this was in one of the bills last session and did not succeed. And again, a 2/3 plus sense of the group was to try again with that one. Some other provisions that are on the table, again, not with consensus, but with greater than 2/3 or at 2/3 support. One is to expand the definition of mental health court to clarify that AOT courts count as mental health courts, largely for purposes of grant funding opportunities through grants that are made available through the governor's office. Another provision looks at and borrows from some ideas from other jurisdictions. Right now, as you know, emergency detentions can only be carried out by peace officers, or if there's an MOU with EMTs, or by guardians. This would permit an expansion where members of an LMHA's MCOT team would be able to initiate an emergency detention when they deem it safe to do so. And as I know, several other states have done this. There's also been intervention by the U.S. Department of Justice in federal litigation raising ADA concerns where only law enforcement responds. And so this would create an additional mechanism there. Another provision that has been recommended is to look at the commonly occurring scenario where some people in the throes of a mental health crisis, particularly individuals with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, have this co-occurring symptom of anosognosia. I had to practice that pronunciation from the mirror this morning, but we learned more about that at our last summit, this lack of insight. And so several states have passed provisions to include a lack of capacity alternative for their inpatient and outpatient commitment criteria. We have that for our outpatient, but not inpatient, and also add some clarification language consistent with that for the deterioration verbiage that we have in our emergency detention provisions. The next concept relates to medication proceedings and orders for persons who are in the jails. It does several things. One, we'd heard concerns from Judge Phillips and others that particularly in rural areas, it's challenging to get sufficient physicians or psychiatrists to be able to provide what's required currently under Chapter 574 of the Health and Safety Code and 46 BO 86 for persons in jail when medication proceedings are being pursued. So this concept would allow extenders, if you will, who are providing the healthcare services in the jail, would make some revisions, clarifications with respect to the various laws that are applicable and the standards that are applicable, and then extend certain deadlines for some medication orders for individuals who've been recommitted, and we have a change in some of the legal processes. Again, this one did not have unanimity. There was some objection, but had more than a 2/3 support. The next provision is identifying that judges who oversee specialty court programs, particularly talking about mental health court programs, if, for example, the judge has normally just a misdemeanor docket, for example, a court at law, but is receiving cases into the program for individuals who are facing felonies, that they have the ability to serve as they would for those with misdemeanors for the issues relating to the mental health court program. Just about done. The next one, we approved a concept in principle, but we didn't have recommended bill language at this point. And so this one is still sort of on the fence about going forward, but there have been efforts to create a uniform pretrial procedure in Texas in capital cases where the defendant may be a person with an intellectual disability. And I know the Court of Criminal Appeals has repeatedly asked the legislature to try and come up with something on this. The Court of Criminal Appeals, lacking legislative support, had come up with its own standard that itself was challenged successfully in the courts. And so we think it's time to try and get something done, but we're not at the stage of having legislative matters. And then last, we concluded by consensus that we should remove one of the concepts that had been before the legislature each of the last two sessions, which we still think the policy is good, but don't think the JCMH should lead with this in terms of at least this session, given some of the significant changes in membership in the legislature. But the provision, the concept is that if law enforcement is serving a warrant pursuant to an emergency mental health order, that the law enforcement officer, as a matter of issues of safety, should be able to secure the firearm, such as already is in the law when there's a warrantless emergency detention. Again, we think this concept is solid, but we have, I guess, political concerns about going forward with this one at this time. The last thing I would note is I greatly appreciate all the members of the committee. Like good lawyers, good judges, sometimes we disagree, and I very much appreciate that when we disagree agreeably, and it's great to work with such a fantastic team. So I'll stop there, Justice Boyce, and turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shannon. I guess I'm not entirely sure how much time is allocated for today's purpose, the purposes of today's meeting, for reactions to particular proposals or the overall process. But what I will say is that to the extent that the commission members, the commissioners, and other stakeholders have input or comments on these proposals, that input is gratefully received, however it is delivered, whether that is in the context of a meeting today, or individual feedback, or the chat, or following up with me or Professor Shannon or Christy, or however it wants to be delivered. This is intended to be a dialogue and a collaborative process. At the end of the day, the recommendations that get made are going to get made at a level on the org chart that is higher than this commission, but we want to have the dialogue.
And Judge Boyce, one thing, if I could, that I neglected, one thing I neglected to mention that I'd add is last session, a number of our concepts, well, I guess all of our concepts were put in one omnibus bill. As we go forward, our committee was strongly recommending that they not all be lumped together. We recognize some of these concepts are perhaps more controversial, not all, but that some of these need to be standalone bills and not just lumped together, because we want to have a good percent rate for passage.
Well, and I'll just jump in and say that is feedback we got from Senator Zaffarini and Representative Moody about how to better approach these issues in a way that we're not having to carve away from an omnibus bill at the end of the day.
Yeah. Better to win some parts than lose it all.
And that observation is a good reminder that this is as much an art as it is a science, and things have their own rhythm and dynamic in the legislative process. And so the merits of the proposals and the ideas that are under discussion and under consideration are absolutely serious things that are taken seriously. And what happens when they enter the river of the legislative session is some things make it through and some things do not, and that's kind of the nature of the undertaking. So I'm going to look to Christy for guidance about whether this would be an appropriate time to solicit any input in this forum that the commissioners and participants in today's meeting want to offer.
Justice Boyce, I think we need to move on, and have any comments just go via email or phone call, anything like that. We have Megan Lavoie here for the next segment.
Well, because I can take direction, I will suggest that your input is welcomed and encouraged in the format that Christy just set out. So thank you.
Okay, and thank you for joining us, Megan. If you will give us an update with OCA and the Judicial Council.
Sure, thanks. And I would be happy to give my time to you, Justice Boyce. I just have a brief update from the council and OCA. I think probably I missed the very first part of the meeting, but I think that Professor Shannon discussed how the JCMH recommendations, the legislative recommendations, will go through the Judicial Council, and typically they will go through the Civil Justice or the Criminal Justice Committee. So we're looking forward to seeing those recommendations. This year we have 4 committees for the Judicial Council: Data, Public Trust and Confidence, Civil Justice, and Criminal Justice. And some of the things that the council will be looking at over the next couple of months are the use of artificial intelligence in our courts, court efficiency, studying ways to simplify jurisdiction to make it more uniform across the state. They're taking a harder look at court security, not only for judges, but also for court personnel and court staff. They're also going to continue to look at bail and making recommendations to improve our bail system. And then another new one this time or this year is studying shortages in judicial professions. So the shortages with court reporters and court interpreters are two of the big ones that the committees have been talking about. So just a brief timeline of how the council works. So just in case some of you aren't familiar, the Judicial Council is the policymaking body for the judiciary. The chair of the council is Chief Justice Hecht, and the vice chair is presiding Judge Keller. And by statute, I also serve as the executive director of the Judicial Council. Our next Judicial Council meeting is April 26th, and all of our committees are meeting before that meeting on the 26th. They'll again meet in May and June, and again sometime in August and early September. And our final council meeting for this year will probably likely be at the end of September or beginning of October, where the council will adopt recommendations and adopt their reports. And the recommendations aren't just for the legislature. Some of them will also be to the Supreme Court. Sometimes they also make recommendations to OCA. So they have lots of charges and have been hard at work. And so I'm really excited to see what the council comes up with this year. Something else I wanted to update the commission on, Senate interim charges came out yesterday. I don't know if that has been discussed, but there's a couple that I think the commission would be interested in. One is there's a specific interim charge in the Senate Finance Committee to study mental health services and inpatient facilities. The specific charge reads to monitor the implementation of Senate Bill 30 that the 88th legislature passed with regard to appropriations made for expanding mental health services and inpatient facilities across the state. The committee is to report on the progress of inpatient facility construction projects, as well as assess and report on the effectiveness of spending on mental health services. So I think that's one that the commission could definitely have a role in and should watch closely. Also in Senate Business and Commerce Committee, there is an artificial intelligence charge specifically to examine the development and utilization of artificial intelligence and evaluate the implications of AI adopted across the public and private sectors. There's so many groups, not just the Judicial Council, but I know that the State Bar and other national groups. I'm on a National Joint Technology Committee that is taking a hard look at the use of AI in courts. So I think that will come up in that committee. And then also there is a charge on bail and the use of charitable bail organizations in Senate criminal justice. So those are the three that I think that the commission would be really interested in and definitely should be paying attention to. Just a brief OCA update. The big thing that we are working on right now is implementing two data bills. One is House Bill 1182 and the other is House Bill 2384, and they became effective via Judicial Council rule in March of this year. House Bill 1182 applies specifically to jurisdictions over 1 million. So there's 6 counties that it applies to. And it is requiring clerks to report more granular information. There's actually 8 data elements. So right now, OCA only collects data by county. It's at the aggregate level. We do not collect any data except for at the JP municipal level by court. So House Bill 1182 will now start collecting those 8 data elements by court, and it will be by case categories. So civil, family, criminal, mental health, and guardianship and probate. Also, House Bill 2384 applies to the entire state, and that is also requiring OCA and the Judicial Council to collect more granular information at the court level. The 3 data elements for 2384 that will now be collected by court are the court's clearance rate, the average time of cases before the court from filing to disposition, and the age of the court's active pending caseload. And we will see those first reports, because it's an annual report, in November of this year. Another big data project that we are working on is case level data. So collecting more granular information instead of aggregate data. The legislature did give OCA an appropriation to procure a new system to collect this information. And that RFO just went out at the end of March. So we are very excited about that. It's a very big project that we have lots of stakeholders working on. And another RFO that we are about to release early next week is for a text reminder program. This was also a legislative mandate for OCA to procure a system that counties can use to send out text reminders to defendants and litigants about their court date. And so we expect that RFO to go out next week, hopefully putting the finishing touches on it today, and it will be on the streets on Monday or Tuesday. So 2 really big technology projects that are in development, and we will hopefully have ready by next session. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about another a big study that we are doing that was actually a rider that was put in OCA's budget on the need for judicial staff across the state. So to my knowledge, there's never been a weighted caseload done on the need for judicial staff. And when I say judicial staff, I'm talking about at the trial court level. And so we are working with PPRI, with Texas A&M, to do this study. And we will be making recommendations on salaries for court staff, and then also need for court staff across the state. And so I think a couple other states, Kentucky, Colorado, have done similar studies. So we are really excited about the study and what can come out of that. So that's just my brief update. Lots of things going on. Also, we're working on implementing the 15th Court of Appeals and the business courts across the state. So lots of work going on at OCA that I'm really excited about. Happy to answer any questions, Christy.
Thank you so much, Megan. Good thing you don't have very much to do. All right, well, if no questions, we will move on to our jurist and residence reports. Judge Carr.
Good morning. I'll apologize in advance. The Blue Angels are practicing right across the lake from my house. So if it sounds like I'm under attack, it's all good here. You're welcome to bring your lawn chairs if you're in the DFW this weekend. Just send me an email and we'll make a space for you. At the last commission meeting, we promised to have a full report on the mental health court's collaboration, which was a remarkable experience. A learning collaborative we held online during the first quarter of 2024. This collaboration was for judges only and started with online classes. We covered a broad array of topics, including how to start a court, data collection and usage, which is certainly important in refining your project as you go along, and ethics and other similar considerations. And to show you some of the things that we did, I would like to briefly turn it over to IT wizard Rose McBride, who will play a short video for the technically inept myself. Rose, if you will please proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Share.
The Mental Health Courts Collaborative is an online program that the Commission started to do some education and some training about mental health courts. We wanted to make sure that judges who are wanting to start a mental health court or who have a nascent mental health court had the support that they needed to make sure that it was successful. It was 3 online modules on the first Friday of each month in January, February, and March. Those were 1 hour of education and discussion at the lunch hour. The commission started offering technical assistance in 2022. And one form of technical assistance is what we called professional peer networking, where someone could email us with a question or a concern and say, I'd really rather talk about this with another executive director of a local mental health authority, or another judge, or specifically another judge who runs a mental health court. And we started seeing many of these questions related to judges and mental health courts. So we thought, why not get all these folks in the same place?
I am Judge Yolanda Huff. I preside over County Court 12 in Barrett County, and I also preside over the Mental Health Court for Barrett County. I've been presiding over that mental health court for going on 6 years now. My role as a mentor in the collaborative for the Judicial Commission on Mental Health is that I serve as like a resource for judges around the state of Texas that are looking to get a mental health court started in their county. What do I do? What do you guys do in your court? How is this done? Am I doing it right? Those are some of the things that we talked about in those collaborative meetings that we had.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Edgeworth. I am a presiding judge of the 219th District Court, and we have an adult mental health court. At the time that they sent out the opportunity, our court had been going for about 9 months. And so I thought, what a wonderful way to be able to have some more interaction with judges who have already had mental health courts for, some have had them for years and years and years, and to ask all of our questions now that we've gotten started, but you don't know what you don't know. I thought every single one of them had focused on something that we needed. So whether it was ethics in your mental health court, what we needed to be thinking about from the constitutional and legal side of it, and then the practical side of it. What does it look like to just run the court? What should you expect? What are different ways that judges lead their courts, and what issues have come up that they have needed to deal with that we've also had come up?
I'm Selena Solis. I'm the presiding judge of the 243rd District Court in El Paso County, Texas. I went to the Mental Health Summit last year, and I made sure I talked to Judge Carr, Christy Taylor, Molly Davis. They had a little roundtable get together with all the judges and about that we're just starting out, and said, well, we're going to put together this collaborative. Do anyone interested apply? So as soon as I got back, I applied because I was just starting the mental health court, the mental health court in El Paso. My network of judges that are involved in mental health specialty courts has expanded. So I have a list of judges, and I keep meeting more. I've learned that I'm not alone. I've learned not to reinvent the wheel.
The feedback that I've heard so far has been very enthusiastic. Some of our participants have asked for more classes, as many as 6. And many of them have been very excited about the relationships that they formed with each other and also with their mentor judges.
This is what I tell the participants. You have a purpose for being here on this earth, and your purpose is not to be in jail. So if we can help each individual do this, if my part is helping the judges teach each individual, each participant that's in their program this, it makes us all better as a society. It really does.
Thank you, Rose. As you can see in these early reports, it has been a very positive reaction. Don't be alarmed that a number of the interviews were held in a bar area, because remember, we're providing the 1% mixed beverage tax to support specialty court programs. So it was a mission from God. But the staff has sent out an evaluation. So for those of you who have not yet filled out your evaluation, because this feedback is very important, we hope to continue this program and offer it to other courts. It's very short, only 10 questions, and I filled it out. It takes less than 5 minutes. So thank you very much. And at this time, I'll pitch the ball to Judge Specia.
Thank you, Judge Carr, and thank you for the work on the collaborative. Just a point of personal privilege here. I just want to recognize how hard Justice Boyce and Professor Shannon are working, and now they've gone to a national level. They put an amazing amount of time in this, and I appreciate it, and frankly, the state of Texas appreciates it. For many years, I presided and founded the Bexar County Family Treatment Court, a specialty court for families involved in the child welfare system. Specialty courts have an enormous potential to improve public safety, reduce recidivism, reunite families, and save lives. And that's really the purpose of the collaborative, to really focus on that and help judges do it. The National Specialty Court Organization is now called All Rise. They recently released a very valuable document that will be integral to the work of specialty courts, entitled A Practitioner's Guide to Constitutional and Legal Issues in Adult Drug Courts. And the constitutional issues are something that judges struggle with and really need some support. This has case law to it. The research is focused on and the staff is dropping a link in the chat, but it has research aimed at drug courts. But All Rise has recently stated that many of the best practices from adult drug courts have been found to apply to other treatment court models, and I found that to be truth. I founded my family drug treatment court after researching and working with adult drug courts. Their best practice standards have been expanded to apply to all adult treatment courts, and they have stated that the research for drug courts should be applied to other specialty courts. So if you are starting a court or have a court, I think this is a great resource to look at. It has relevant case law for various constitutional issues and voluntary plea agreements and drug testing, but it also incorporates best practices and standards that are recommended by All Rise. I encourage you to review the guide and put it to use in your specialty court. The JCMH staff are also creating a quick reference tool based on the guide. For us judges, if it's longer than one page, we tend not to read it, so a quick reference guide is really wonderful to have. And we will update you when that is available. Also, and I found this out, I do not have much information about it. I'd like somebody from HHSC to say something about it, but there was a grand opening of the additional beds that are authorized by the legislature and built out at the San Antonio State Hospital this week. I don't know how many beds, types of beds, but there's some additional capacity now at the San Antonio State Hospital. So I hope somebody from HHSC gives us a quick update on that. Now, next, our staff, Molly Davis particularly, will update us on projects. And so I'm going to pass it off to Molly. Thank you, Molly.
Oh, well, thanks, Judge.
Yes, excuse me.
John, real quick, according to the news, 300 beds.
Wow. And I'd like to know if they know how many of these are, how they're broken out. That's an amazing system.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Molly.
Oh, thank you, Judge. Thank you, Judge. I have a quick report on our technical assistance projects. Our most high-profile technical assistance project is SIM mapping. In February, we completed a SIM mapping in Lubbock County, and just last week, we completed a youth SIM mapping of the juvenile justice systems in Blanco and Llano counties. Those reports are still under review, but they will be posted to the JCMH website once they're complete. We have plans to map the juvenile justice systems in Smith, Grayson, and Cameron counties this year, as well as to collaborate on a mapping project with the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute in Williamson County. We also offer other types of technical assistance, such as expert consultation, professional peer networking, and training. In the first quarter of 2024, so January, February, and March, JCMH received 54 requests for technical assistance. We were able to fulfill 42 of those requests. Several of them are still outstanding. We served 1,704 people in the first 3 months of 2024 in 33 counties in the state of Texas, including many statewide groups and even the state of Ohio, who reached out to us for assistance in starting a mental health court in a rural area. The most common types of technical assistance are professional peer networking, people looking to talk to another person who hold the same role that they do, and training. The word has gotten out that we have several experts in the field on our staff, and we've each been invited to conduct relevant training several times so far this year. Christy Taylor was invited to speak to the presiding judges in February, and she was also featured on a nationwide webinar with the Bureau of Justice Assistance in March. So that's excellent, not just for Christy, but also for the commission as well. And speaking of experts, Kama Harris is up next.
Thank you so much, Molly. So if you can believe it, it's already time to start planning the 2024 Judicial Summit on Mental Health. This year, the summit's going to be held at the Marriott Hotel and Conference Center in Allen, Texas, and it'll be November 21st and 22nd. This is the week before Thanksgiving, even though it sounds like it's supposed to be Thanksgiving. And the schedule is going to look a little different this year. So there's going to be a commission meeting on the Wednesday before the summit starts. That'll happen in the afternoon on November 20th. And then the full day of summit presentations on November 21st and a half day of programming on that Friday, November 22nd. So some upcoming deadlines to look toward. We have the save the date and the request for proposals going out at the beginning of May. Registration for this year's conference will happen May 15th. And then all those proposals are due on May 30th. The summit committee will start likely meeting in July. We need to nail down a date, and then we'll send out that calendar invite. And if you weren't previously on the summit committee, but you would like to be, please send me an email and we'll get you on the list. And next up is Andy. Thank you.
Thanks, Kama. I'm going to share a couple updates first about the Resources and Innovations map. We've had some great technical help, and so there are going to be updates next week to highlight specific innovations in counties throughout the state. So those are just new and exciting programs that we want to highlight those new approaches. We are going to continue to update those entries as we learn about new things and encourage you to submit entries to be featured as well. Additionally, the map is being updated to better categorize and display youth-specific information across the state and in each county that will allow users to view adult or youth-specific information or all available resources in each county or statewide. We're excited to continue improving this tool, and like I said, those updates will go live next week. We'll have some updating to do on our end, but it will be great, and we're excited about that. Additionally, the data committee will meet next week and continue our work on a guide for data collection and use in addressing mental health cases in Texas. Our goal is to have a guide ready for publication before the summit, and I'm excited to continue development on that. And finally, JCMH is in the process of setting up a committee focused on addressing issues relating to substance use disorder. Some of you have already expressed your interest, and we're excited to announce that committee will be chaired by Judge Roxanne Nelson. If you haven't already told us and would like to be involved with that committee, please send me an email and let me know. I'm now going to turn it over to Rose McBride again for more updates on communications.
Thank you, Andy. I am going to share with you some of the metrics from our social media accounts over the past 2 years. So I went through and I collected data following our Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram accounts. Our LinkedIn is by far the most popular. We hit 1,000 followers in March. So that is getting the word about our mission out to 1,000 people who are following us. So that's so exciting. And I think it's also our most popular account just because it's young professionals looking for ideas and for connections. So that has been really successful. If you're not following us on any of these platforms, please do. I posted out grant opportunities, events that our staff and our commissioners are part of, news related to the JCMH throughout the state, different resources available, and projects that we are working on. So please follow us. And this is over our last 2-ish years. So I am excited to hopefully continue that growth. Since our last meeting, we've published 3 new podcast episodes. So one with Sergeant Sean Edwards, who's our collaborative council member with the Burleson County Sheriff's Office's Crisis Intervention Team. That was about rural diversion. And then we had another with Dr. Sandra Smith, who's also one of our collaborative council members, as well as the Vice President of Via Hope. And on that podcast with her was Abena Asante, a senior program officer with St. David's Foundation. And that one was about the Libraries for Health initiative. which places peer support specialists in rural libraries across Central Texas. And then finally, we just released an episode this week with Travis County DA Jose Garza, and that was about the Travis County Transformation Project. That's a pre-arrest diversion pilot program for 15 and 16-year-olds who are involved in family violence. So you can get those on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We also have links to those on our website, so you can go check them out. In May, we'll have another episode. We have one episode monthly. We're still finalizing what that's going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be very exciting, and I hope you tune in for that. So I will pass things back to Judge Hervey before we take a break. Judge Hervey.
I thought that we were going to have something from Cynthia. We're not having something from Cynthia?
We didn't have an update this time.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I guess it's 4 minutes early, but it's time for a break. So let's come back at 10:30 and we'll look forward to proceeding through the program. Thank you.
Okay, Christy, are we ready? Are we ready to start back up?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Before we move on to our next item on the agenda, one of the continuing challenges that has really bothered Christy and her team is that we have a number of counties with more than 200,000 in population that have yet to establish a mental health court. And it has been really great through the leadership of Judge Carr and Judge Specia to see Christy and her team really try to provide the resources that these counties need to begin, because there's just such an inertia and a competition for judicial resources and time. And really sort of that sounds overwhelming. I don't know where to begin. And we have really moved the needle in terms of providing information about how to begin, because starting is the most important thing. And so to all of you who have helped Christy and her team and our two wonderful jurists and residents with this project, thank you so much. Whether you've been a judge who's mentoring other judges with your own experiences with the mental health court, or a mental health provider that helps with helps educate other local mental health stakeholders about how they can be an important part of this process. We couldn't do it without you. And if you haven't been involved, I encourage you to reach out to Christy and her team, because the goal is to entice and encourage. And as we do that and model it for other places, we'll be able to help more people. So thank you to our jurists and residents and Christy and her team for really making a lot of progress. And I saw Beth Lawson nodding her head about the recent meeting in Lubbock. And I know that there are others around the state that are very grateful for the work the commission's doing. And we couldn't do it without, oh, I'm sorry, Judge Herbie, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going on, so you may have something to add.
No, I just wanted to ditto Justice Bland's eloquence and thank everybody profusely. The work has been terrific and well received, and we're very proud of all of you.
Okay. And so, the next thing that I think we have really benefited from at JCMH is learning about what is available in our state through other providers that are in this space. And today we have Ron Lucy, who's the Executive Director of the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. And he's here to tell us about what they do. They are an organization that looks at disability policies across the state and recommends changes, and across a really broad spectrum of areas, including obviously accessibility, employment, but also criminal justice, our educational system, emergency preparedness. I mean, it's really a wide-ranging spectrum of places where they are lending their expertise. And they, like us, they provide technical assistance, and they also serve as a place for people with Texas citizens with disabilities to get more information, be referred to other organizations, and really serve as a clearinghouse on issues for people in Texas with disabilities. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ron.
Okay, good morning. My name is Ron Lucy. I'm the Executive Director for the Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. Joining me this morning is our research specialist, Rebecca Lopez, who will be sharing our presentation. I want to thank Molly Davis for introducing the Judicial Commission on Mental Health to the Governor's Committee at our meeting in Beaumont in January, and we're really glad to return the favor. I see a lot of friendly faces in the audience. We were happy to hear from Judge Betancourt at our meeting in Edinburgh last October. And I even see one member of the audience who is a former Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities member and a Governor's Trophy winner. And that's Professor Brian Shannon. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and get started.
Ron, you're muted.
I'm sorry, that's better. First, I'd like to introduce my staff. We're a very small office with 5 staff, and we have myself, our research specialist, Rebecca, community outreach coordinator, Norman Kiki, our accessibility and disability rights coordinator, Matthew Dickens, and our office administrator. We also sorry. In addition to our 5 staff, we have a committee made up of 12 members appointed by Governor Abbott. We are part of a national network of governors' committees on people with disabilities. As was stated earlier, we are a leading state agency that looks at disability issues from a cross-disability standpoint. We were formed in 1949 by executive order from Governor Allen Shivers at the end of World War II when the GI Bill passed. 4 years later, when a lot of those GIs were graduating from college and getting ready to enter the workforce, our state needed an agency that could advocate for the full employment of veterans with disabilities, and that's the genesis of our agency. Fast forward to 1991, and we were finally established in statute as the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. We're considered a trustee division within the Office of the Governor. Our mission is to further opportunities for Texans with disabilities to lead lives of independence, productivity, and self-determination. We're organized with 12 committee members appointed by Governor Abbott from across the state. It's a very talented group of individuals with diverse backgrounds, representing individuals with different disabilities, intellectual developmental disabilities, deafness, hard of hearing, blindness, physical disabilities. In the spirit of the common saying in the disability community, nothing about us without us, at least 7 of our members must be Texans with disabilities, and we exceed that by quite a bit. We also pull on the talent of our ex officio agencies. I like to say our ex officios, they get a say, but they don't get a vote. And our ex officios include the Texas Workforce Commission. Primarily, we interact with our state's vocational rehabilitation services at TWC, the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, the Department of Licensing and Regulation. The Department of Criminal Justice was the newest ex officio agency, just added in 2023 when we added criminal justice to our policy issue areas. The Texas Education Agency, the State Independent Living Council, and most importantly, other agencies as required to fulfill our mission. So we'll often call on agencies that align with a very specific policy issue and ask them to come present at the Governor's Committee. And here is our 10 issue areas. As said in the introduction, we look at disability from a broad perspective, and none of these policy issues function alone. For example, employment of people with disabilities. People with disabilities can't be successful in competitive integrated employment in their community without accessible transportation or without having access to accessible and affordable housing. So we look holistically at the lives of people with disabilities and what it takes for them to be successful in the community. So here's what we can do for you and for Texans with disabilities. I like to say our biggest superpower is our ability to listen. We travel across the state and take public comment from people with disabilities and interact with stakeholder groups. Often people say, what is on the agenda of the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities? And I usually pause for dramatic effect and say that depends on you. The groups that come to us with unique challenges are the groups that often end up on our agenda and are able to address the committee. We try to identify and share best practices with local disability policy issues. We have a network of mayor and county committees across the state. Right now, some of those local committees are rebuilding following COVID-19. A lot of them went quiet during the pandemic and were not able to meet quorum. These are local boards and commissions that focus on disability policy issues, and they're part of the network of governors' committees. We study and analyze policy issues within our 10 policy issue areas, and we're able to issue reports. We sometimes end up getting homework assignments from the Texas legislature to participate in interim studies and issue those reports to our website and report back to the Texas legislature. And we also work with those ex officio agencies on administrative solutions to make sure that the existing laws pertaining to people with disabilities are administered and implemented in the best possible way to impact on the lives of people with disabilities. Other things, using our communication channels to share information. I was interested in looking at the communication statistics from the Judicial Commission. We're not on LinkedIn right now, but that's certainly something we should probably look at. We have approximately 20,000 subscribers. These are disability organizations and individuals that subscribe to our Gov Delivery channel, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram. We often serve on other state task forces and work groups and advisory committees, as do our 12 committee members appointed by Governor Abbott. And we provide invited resource testimony to House and Senate committees during the regular legislative sessions. We also provide GCPD policy resources to disability advisory committees. When we issue our reports, including our special reports, often the stakeholder groups that work with us to develop those policies will ask us to melt our copy machine during session to provide those reports to provide testimony to House and Senate committees. We also provide comment to the Office of the Governor's Budget and Policy team and the policy advisors on how bills filed during the session could potentially affect Texans with disabilities. Of course, the one thing that we cannot do during session is advocate for or against the passage of any specific legislation. Like all state agencies, we're limited to providing factual resource testimony during session. I mentioned earlier that we have a accessibility and disability rights coordinator, Matthew Dickens, and one of his responsibilities is to provide accessibility and disability rights training to communities across the state of Texas. Our primary target audience is Americans with Disabilities Act coordinators with municipalities and state agencies. And we have a past library of accessibility training on our governor's YouTube channel. We also take requests. So if there are requests from members of the disability community or from municipalities on a particular training topic, we're always trying to plan a couple of months ahead for those trainings. And you can follow the link to those trainings on this slide. All of our trainings are fully accessible. We use real-time captioning and American Sign Language interpreters for those trainings. And we also use an accessible platform. Mentioned early that we issue reports. There's a quick example of those reports up on the screen that fall within our 10 policy issue areas. On the next slide, you'll find a direct link to our biennial report to the Texas legislature. In the same way that you all walk through your policy recommendations, we will be doing the same thing at our next meeting in Amarillo. Not all of our recommendations from the 88th Texas legislature were successful, and so the committee is having to make some tough choices on which ones they're going to continue to carry to have that next turn at bat, so to speak, or which ones they're going to set aside to prioritize other recommendations. And it's a pretty methodical process. And when the committee makes a policy recommendation, that's not the last step in the policy process. It's really one of the first steps. All of our policies in our biennial report have to go up through our chain of command, through the governor's budget and policy division, the governor's office of general counsel, and through the governor's chief of staff. So when it finally does make it to the finish line, it's been thoroughly vetted and hopefully indicates a pretty good consensus. Now I'd like to turn it over to Rebecca Lopez, who's going to be talking about how we address systemic change in the state and some of the topics related to criminal justice that we've been taking up, as well as topics related to mental health.
Yes, so when we're developing proposals, our goal is to address systemic concerns. So we attempt to listen to all Texans, and we make it a priority to reach out to underserved populations. And members of the public with concerns are encouraged, as Ron said, to fill out our policy proposal form. At our quarterly meetings, the committee can address those submitted forms, and they also can receive public testimony, whether in person or written. One example of a public concern that became a law is the Texas Driving with Disability Initiative. Originally, it was the Texas Driving with Autism program, and this trailblazing program focuses on improving the interaction between law enforcement and drivers with disabilities with unique communication needs. So Texans now have the option to disclose a communication impediment directly on the front of their driver license or state ID, or when registering their vehicle through the DMV. And so this would alert a trained officer of an individual who may be slower to respond or one who is deaf and hard of hearing. And the law enforcement training that covers this program are TCOL course 4055 and TCOL course 7887. And so what is great about this initiative is that it was started by a mother who had a son with autism who was concerned about him driving safely when he came of age. So this is just a great example of how we can listen to the public and actually affect change throughout the whole state.
Peace officers are able to access this information about a driver with a communication disability through the TLED system, the Texas Law Enforcement Communications or Telecommunications System. And of course, this is entirely voluntary. A lot of people ask, do we have to share our information about our disability if we want it to be kept private? And of course, the answer is no. Anyone can elect to participate if they choose.
So some of our proposals to the 80th legislature focused on criminal justice, mental health, and IDD in some ways. So one of our policy proposals was that HHSC should task the statewide behavioral health coordinating task force with studying ways to increase the availability and awareness of high quality comprehensive care for people with mental health diagnoses and IDD. Another policy proposal was that an advisory coalition should be formed with subject matter experts from HHSC's Early Childhood Intervention Program, ECI, the Texas Workforce Commission, TWC, and the Texas Education Agency, TEA, to study and make recommendations on pre-service and annual professional development opportunities for providers on supporting children with developmental delays and disabilities, supporting early childhood mental health, and other related topics.
We believe those early foundations really ensure that our kids don't end up on the wrong track and have the support they need to go on to fulfill that mission statement that we talked about earlier of being able to lead lives of independence, productivity, and self-determination, and hopefully not end up before any of your courts.
And so, as we said, we have 10 issue areas, and criminal justice is a new area for the committee. So based on comment the committee has received, these are the current committee's topics of interest. So firstly, mental health diversion courts. As Ron said, we've received presentations on this, and I actually believe that Judge Betancourt is on the line, and she presented to our committee about mental health diversion courts. Another topic of interest is supported decision-making agreement recognition by the courts. Another one is jail releases of 17-year-olds with disabilities without parental notification. And finally, elopement of people with disabilities and the statewide alerts.
I think you just
so these are all,
sorry. You briefly cut out for a second.
Oh, let me know if I need to repeat anything or feel free to repeat. So these were all brought to us by public comment at various committee meetings or through our email or our phone. And so these are the topics that we are currently focusing on, and areas that we're looking to learn more about what's out there and what we could, what proposals we could make to the legislature to support these communities and populations.
As stated at the beginning of our presentation, Texas is a big state, and collaborating between various advisory committees and commissions is essential to make sure that our elected officials have the information to make the best decisions. And just earlier this week, we were talking to the Texas Commission on Jail Standards about some of these same policy issue areas. And we welcome an opportunity to align and regularly communicate with the Judicial Commission on Mental Health, and not have this be the last time we interact, but part of an ongoing conversation. We also look forward to attending your conference in November. And as we mentioned earlier, we're in a learning and listening period on criminal justice. This is a new policy issue area for the Governor's Committee, and in September of last year, we spent an entire day with several different state agencies training our committee members appointed by Governor Abbott to learn about these issues and how the criminal justice system functions here in Texas.
So we look forward to learning more about the needs of people with disabilities in the criminal justice system. And if anyone is interested, our next quarterly meeting is coming up in 2 weeks, April 25th and 26th. It'll be held at the Region 16 Education Service Center in Amarillo, Texas. But we always have a hybrid option, so you can attend virtually as well. Like we said, we always take public comment that can be either in person, virtual, or submitted ahead of time by email or written. And here is our contact information.
We probably have a few minutes for questions if anybody has a question for us.
My hand is raised, so I don't know if you're gonna.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Judge Betancourt, I recognize your voice. Oh, no, it wasn't Judge Betancourt. Sorry.
No, this is. Hi, this is Magdalena Morales Aina. I am the director for the adult probation in El Paso. I'm also a commissioner on the JCMH. One of the questions that I have for you is that, have you had any contact with the probation chiefs? We have a probation quarterly meeting, and you have 123 directors from across the state that would greatly be interested, because we do have diversion programs, but we also have folks who are coming into the justice system that truly need advocacy to assist them with services to help them navigate the system, which is what we try to do. But I think this would be a great partnership. So I'd like to attend your meetings, and I'd like to invite you to one of our quarterly meetings to do this great presentation.
Yeah, we would love to interact with your probation chiefs. When we talked to our governor and to the policy advisor on criminal justice that works in BPP and said, what are the governor's most important priorities for this population? And it was one of his biggest priorities is reentry and making sure that that's a one-way trip and not a round trip. We want to make sure that individuals with disabilities that are involved in criminal justice, if diversion is not happening and they're going all the way through reentering the community, that they have the supports that they need, that they're able to connect with vocational rehabilitation, that they're able to reestablish their benefits if they were receiving SSI or SSDI, and that reentry, as I said, be a one-way trip. We also want to make sure that our state agencies are fully supporting your courts. We know that sometimes eligibility for some state programs can be protracted, and at the same time, the patience of the courts doesn't always align with the duration of eligibility determination. So we're doing everything we can do to work with our state agency partners to try to either look at establishing specialty caseloads or expediting eligibility processes to make sure that the terms of your courts are met by individuals with disabilities.
Ron, and Justice Bland, now it is I, Judge Bettencourt. Ron, great presentation.
I'm
but-
so glad. I'm so glad because I
But I
wanted you
do
to
appreciate the compliment from being compared to Ms. Morales. It is a compliment. And Ms. Morales has a great point, and Judge Wheelis beat me to it on the chat, of course. But yes, also incorporating the juvenile probation departments. One of the issues I spoke to Ron and the amazing committee on when they came to visit our great area was about how treatment is actually being provided in these juvenile probation departments, along, I'm sure, in the adult, especially when you have in-house mental health professionals providing services. And so the issue that we were seeing is that Medicaid doesn't see that as a treatment facility. And so therefore, whenever a child or parents trying to request transportation because of the lack of, it's very difficult to get it approved through Medicaid because they're not being viewed as a mental health, as a provider, as if they're in a clinic or they have their own separate entity. So that was something that I spoke to the committee about. They were so open and they were so amazed at just the simplicity of that issue and not, addressing it. So I'm very happy that Ron and Rebecca took the time to come and present to us. But again, I would also recommend that you reach out to the chief juvenile or to the juvenile probation, or I think it's a council of chief juvenile chief the council of the chiefs that make up the juvenile probation areas. And I know that's something that I think they would really be inclined to look into.
If Molly or some of the staff could help make those connections, if y'all would share those contacts through Molly to us, we will be glad to add them to a future meeting agenda. And Judge Bettencourt, we have not forgotten that transportation issue related to Medicaid transportation. We continue to kick that around and work with our ex officio members at HHSC to see how we can get rules changed to make that a possibility. $10,000 worth of transportation vouchers shouldn't stand in the way of the young women served by your court to get the services they need to get back on track.
Anybody else?
I had, this is Connie Almeida. I had a comment. This was very informative. So when you talk about the jail release of 17-year-olds with disabilities without parental notification, of course, that's concerning. And I guess this is maybe a follow-up question, a follow-up comment. Some of those children might be involved in our CPS system. So my assumption would be that CPS would be notified of those releases, or that's an assumption, or is that not correct because they're also 17-year-old?
I think that could be a valid assumption. We have the Department of Family and Protective Services as one of our ex officio representatives. So when Ms. Lopez put these policy topics on our slide, these topics are not finally ground and sanded, polished policy proposals ready for the legislature. These are issues that we're continuing to develop. And, I like to say for every complicated issue, there's usually a simple solution, and it's usually wrong. We don't want to make recommendations that create more problems than they solve. And primarily when we're looking at those 17-year-olds being released from jails, we're talking about individuals with IDD. And we're hearing that many of those individuals being released downtown at 5 o'clock on a Friday night are ending up being human trafficking victims. And some of them are going missing, and the next time they're legally authorized representatives or guardians or parents find them, it's when they get arrested a second time. And we think we can do better than that. And so this is a policy issue that we're leaning in on, but also still trying to develop. And we really welcome your input on that.
Thank you. I'll try to connect and have would love to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alameda. Anybody else?
I just have a comment related to that and a question about how our work dovetails to the greater work of the state. There's been conversation for years about trying to make a consistent adult age of adulthood and change our 17-year-olds, bifurcation compared to 18-year-old. Could this conversation and this kind of need contribute to that overall conversation? And if so, how would we do that?
Yeah, I think we need to have a deeper conversation among the experts. And if we want to pull together a small working group of Child Protective Services, some judges, policy experts, experts on intellectual and developmental disabilities, I think it's a good conversation to have, and we're glad to host it. We all know that people have a different functional age. Just because you're 17, if you have IDD, you might be functioning at the age of a 6 or 7-year-old. And so releasing a 6 or 7-year-old in downtown Austin at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, nobody would do that. But because somebody's chronological age is 17, I don't know that our law enforcement officers always think of it that way. And so we do need to align on this, and we need to look at it from different angles.
All right, very good. Already I can tell that your presentations today have spawned some good connections and conversation around our areas of mutual concern and interest. So
you have our contact information. You can reach out to us directly or connect through Molly to us. And like I said, we look forward to the collaboration.
great. Ms. Lopez, Mr. Lucy, thank you so much for coming today to make this presentation. And now we're going to move on to our supporting organization reports. And I think Christy has been checking in with those that have reports. Am I right about that, Christy, or should I keep going?
Yes, Chief Standridge, I think, is ready and available to report.
Good morning, everybody. I want to sensitize everybody to several things going on the law enforcement front. First of all, the 88th legislature passed Senate Bill 1852. 1852 mandated 16 hours of continued education for every training cycle for every Texas peace officer. The 16 hours has to be what's called Alert Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training curriculum. Alert curriculum is designed around response and recovery from a mass casualty incident. So I serve in the capacity as a commissioner, and I've had a lot of work in this industry. So I proposed that some of this mandated training be focused on moving left of bang. I'm tired of us across the nation focused on the response and recovery. We need to move left of bang, simply meaning we need to work more toward prevention and education. So that earned me more work, regrettably, but I now teach a mandatory 8-hour class wherein every Texas police chief, every sheriff, and now every senior executive leadership in law enforcement agencies across Texas shall attend my 8-hour class done in conjunction with Alert and the Law Enforcement Management Institute of Texas. And so I have opted to spend hours unpacking mental health. More specifically, how to imagine different. So we now are talking at the senior executive level with all law enforcement about CSE teams, MST teams, T-Chat. For so many people in the room, they don't have a clue what these things are. So I'm increasing their awareness. Granted, all of these are not in all 37 LMHAs. We also have very candid conversations about jail diversion. What is true jail diversion? Even within our own industry, we can't agree what true jail diversion is because so many people think jail diversion is they're at the jail. How do we now get them out? To me, that's not true jail diversion. Jail diversion is how do we keep them from going to jail to begin with? So we spend some time talking about CARE. CARE is an acronym. Hopefully everybody's familiar with it. That's the client assignment and registration entry. If a person has received inpatient or outpatient therapy through any state-funded hospital, then they are entered into this statewide database. Of note, and this needs to be changed legislatively, peace officers do not have access to the care portal. So if Stan Standridge contacts a person at 2 o'clock in the morning, I have no idea this person has serious mental illness history. I don't know that until I make the decision to arrest him. I take him to the county jail, and a jailer who doesn't have nearly the extensive training that I do, nor the background investigation that I do, they have access. And then they realize this person has been treated for serious mental illness. And so now the jail is going to treat this person different. That makes no sense to me. I want to move this further upstream where peace officers can be aware of serious mental illness at the time of decision for an arrest so that we can more adequately do jail diversion. So I'm asking for some consideration as it relates to reimagining how we do care. It's not the panacea, because again, this is only for state-funded hospitals. Also, another recurring theme is local mental health authorities are not created from the same cloth. I hear frustration after frustration from chiefs about, well, my LMHA does this, says this, won't do this. Now, granted, I recognize there's two sides to every story, but at some point, I think law enforcement has got to get into the same room with our LMHAs and have a candid conversation. So here is where I'm ultimately leaving the conversation after hours of conversation about mental health. I'm telling them, as a sheriff, as a chief, as a senior executive, you must create leadership collaboratives. If you're tired of doing the same thing and you want to envision different, then do so through a leadership collaborative. Take the ownership, invite people. Here in Hays County, we started doing that following our SIM workshop, and we made the decision that we were going to do it during our lunch hour. Everybody has to eat. Typically, people don't schedule appointments during lunch, and so we meet the first Wednesday of every month, and we unpack different from a leadership collaborative. We have about 16 different entities represented. It's been wildly successful here in Hays County. I'm trying to replicate that success. So I tell them a couple of principal strategies. Establish a leadership collaborative. Secondly, try to get your telehealth crisis services at the time of 911. When they call 911, a family member, if there is not a clear criminal offense and the person is not armed at the time, stop sending cops. Instead, work with your LMHA, use, for an example, avail crisis services that are already under contract with both LMHAs I've worked with, and do a warm handoff to that telehealth service so that they can then get the family or the actual client the services that they need versus sending two cops to it. So I'm preaching telehealth crisis services at time of 911. Last thing I'm doing is I'm really leaning on their need to establish what I call behavioral threat assessment groups. Every entity that I know, they're dealing with persons who are of significant concern and potential danger to themselves or to others, but there's zero active case management. That probably doesn't shock anybody. There's just no active case management. If they will form a BTAG, Behavioral Threat Assessment Group, and imagine different, it needs to be collaborative across the school systems, with the local mental health authority, with judicial or pretrial services, the district attorney's office, and obviously your local mental health authority. If they will get those people into the same room and form an actual behavioral threat assessment group, they can then begin doing active case management to prevent crisis. Because when they're not on calls, they're doing proactive follow-up, checking on the medicinal status, have you taken your meds, etc. We did this in Abilene, and we're doing it now here with some remarkable successes, and I'm trying to replicate this success across the state. Last thing I'll say, I'm pretty frustrated. There's a ton of grant funding through HHSC, and it requires 100% match. That, to me, that just basically says, hey, the HHSC has no money, because I do not have the ability to do 100% match. So I want to sensitize all of us to that 100% match requirement, and I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Before we move on, I noticed Chief Lee, did you want to add to Chief Standridge's comments?
Yeah, I mean, he did a great job. I agree with everything he said, but there's one item that really stood out to me, and that was the access to information for the officers on the street. I spent my first 27 years with Houston Police Department, never even heard of the CCQ, which is the database that's accessed when a person's booked in jail to see if they have any mental health history. So I jumped on that right away because it was eye-opening. And so I started working with advocates and legislators and received extensive pushback saying, because I said, why doesn't the officer on his MDT have access to that CCQ query? So while he's on that traffic stop or on that call for service, have access to see if that person has a mental health history from the state. And like I said, the pushback was extensive. And it doesn't make sense because the only place that information is accessed by the criminal justice system or law enforcement is after they are bringing the person to the jail, and it's done at the booking desk. And my jail staff or civilians, they have access to it to see this person that they're about to put in the jail. And I agree with the chief. The true diversion starts before we get to that jail door. So as much information as possible that we have on a person that has, a history of mental illness that could keep them possibly out of jail for these low-level charges, it just does not make sense that we're not pushing that out everything we can to the officers out there on the street.
Okay, Lee Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. Chief Standridge, I really appreciate your comments. And, this is something we've been involved in for a long time. You and I have worked together, even when you were in Abilene. I will echo some of what you said because, I'll just start with the local match part. I'd remind everybody that the legislature enacted the grant programs that we have, the Justice Involved Grant Program in particular, to ensure that local communities would have skin in the game. There was a precedent that was set in the last legislative session around Rider 52 and funding that did not require local match. We really strongly supported that step. We felt like it was the step in the right direction because local match is hard to come by, particularly when you're in a community that's above the 250,000 threshold that requires one-to-one, so dollar for dollar match on a grant program. So I'm hopeful that in the next legislative session, we'll be able to take the data that was collected from the Rider 52 effort. So, for example, you had just a small amount of money and you had lots and lots of different communities apply to take advantage of that money because it didn't require local match. I'm hopeful that we will be able to have success in the next session, encouraging the legislature to continue what they did with Rider 52, because it's hard to come up with local match. We know it. Everybody knows it. Everybody feels it. The other thing I'll say is, on the data piece and how you take the TLET system and, bring it more to the fore in terms of what happens in a local community. There are lots of examples in rural areas and in large urban areas where law enforcement have been given iPads, for example. That's not a panacea solution, but it does create a circumstance where you're able to more quickly get information. You're more able to quickly access clinical people that can be there at the ready. I'm a strong believer in having information available, but there are other groups out there that have strongly opposed that idea during the legislative process. So we just have to be mindful of that. And then the other part to this is I'll say across the state of Texas today, as a result of legislation that Chair Colcourse really championed, there is a sheriff or the sheriff's designee on every single local mental health authority board across the state. All 39 of them have boards. Those boards are appointed by county commissioners and city council members, and the sheriffs serve as either a voting member or an ex officio voting member. So we fully support creating those leadership collaborations that you're talking about and feel like in communities where that's really been embraced by the sheriff and by the chief deputy in the jail and by the police chiefs in an area, you see the best outcomes there. And so we fully support that and hope that having sheriffs involved, having the voice of local law enforcement is critically important in this work. So I look forward to continue to work with you in partnership to make that happen. And Christy, I appreciate the opportunity to just say a couple of comments about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Judge Liston, is your hand up?
Yes, a quick question for Chief Standridge. When you're doing your education across the state, what reaction are you seeing to 1623. Are you seeing pushback, or are you seeing embracing of the Code of Criminal Procedure 1623?
All right, so I have a bajillion numbers in my head. Remind me 1623.
I'm so sorry, I turned my mute off so fast. So it is the one that requires, it says law enforcement shall make good faith efforts to divert when they encounter someone with a misdemeanor, low-level non-violent offense. They shall make good faith efforts to divert them to the appropriate treatment.
Sure, that's an easy one. Resource-rich counties have no issue with that. They're doing very innovative strategies. Williamson County, Harris County, Lubbock County, we're getting on ban. The ones that are not resource-rich laugh and say, what resources? What diversion? What is Plan B? There is no codified or even identified Plan B. And my response always is, there never was, until somebody took ownership and then began a leadership collaborative to create it.
Okay. Thank you for that response and the thoughtful questions. I think that we need to move on to our next partner organization is Deputy Executive Commissioner Scott Shefflin.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, still morning. Got some good stuff to share. I spoke with y'all about a year ago and talked about how we had finally started to see our wait list come down instead of going up, and that we were doing some pretty aggressive efforts to bring more staff in. So I wanted to catch you up on that. So we implemented those pay raises back in February and March, and did a big push to start doing a lot of recruiting. We have been very successful. The state hospitals are currently at a 93.5% fill rate, which is the highest it's been, at least since I've been in this position, and I think probably predating that. Our turnover was as high as 45% back in 2021. It's now at 25%, which is probably for us a historic low. In addition to that, our forensic wait list is now down 685 individuals from when it hit the high back in December of 2022. That's a 27% decrease in the number of people on the wait list, and we expect to see that continue to go down, but that was really, really good news. We were at a peak of 2,571 people, and we went under 1,900 today. So we're at about 1880, just got it this morning, 1886. Our average daily census is up 461 because we have more beds online. We've got more people we're serving, and we are currently serving an average of about 1,861 patients per day. Just to give you an idea, we had the number of beds that were offline due to staffing. We have gone from 1,500 beds online to now 1,981 beds online. So we have are down to fewer than 100 beds offline due to staffing. That's allowed us to do a lot of basically getting the wait list dug into, getting more people served, and that's been real exciting for us. In addition to that, as Senate Bill 30 was mentioned already, wanted to point out construction and renovation projects that we have coming. Amarillo, we're going to be adding a 75-bed facility there. It's going to be a non-maximum security, so it will have a mix of forensic and non-forensic patients. We're adding a 50-bed maximum security unit in Lubbock. We're adding a 50-bed maximum security expansion at the Rio Grande State Center. We also have a 50-bed forensic expansion that we're going to be started. It was partially funded and for El Paso, and we are currently in the process of acquiring land and getting that started. The Terrell State Hospital is going to be replaced with new facility, and we are also have the Alamo. This is at San Antonio, and I want to answer the question about San Antonio and capacity. We have a 40-bed unit there that's going to be converted into a maximum security unit as well. As you can tell, there were several of these are maximum security because that's where we really need more capacity to start hitting that wait list even harder. The San Antonio State Hospital currently has 302 beds. The new hospital is a 300-bed hospital, but then with that Alamo unit, we're adding those 40 beds will be added as well. And so the delta to that is we're going to be about 40 beds larger when San Antonio gets moved in. We also have some beds offline there due to construction, which obviously they won't be offline anymore because the new hospital is being constructed. Senate Bill 30 also funded some construction grants to build competency restoration beds in non-state owned facilities. And those are going to be in 4 areas of the state, down in Rio Grande Valley, Beaumont, Victoria County, and Montgomery County. Once these are complete, those projects are going to add roughly 166 forensic beds also to our overall capacity. So all this, again, is about adding more capacity, getting beds online, getting people the services they need so we can get them back to court so they can be adjudicated. In addition to that, House Bill 1 provided money for us to add 150 contracted competency restoration beds to the system now. And so the difference being the others are construction grants to build. These are for us to just go out and do direct contracts with. And we are adding those in 4 or 5 areas of the state. We've got the North Texas Behavioral Health Authority we're working with them to open 48 beds in the Dallas area. I think that contract is signed, and I believe they're going to start taking patients any day now. Bexar County is going to be adding 28 beds. Travis County Integral Care is going to have 40 beds. And then we have MHMR Tarrant County, 23 beds. And then Palestine Regional, we're adding 11 beds there. We were originally looking at El Paso, but that kind of fell through. So we're going to add them over at Palestine. So again, once those come on line, that's 150 beds that we expect to see pretty quickly. Again, Dallas already getting started. Those others, the contracts are somewhere between legal, signature, those kind of things. And so certainly by summer, we'll see those opening up. And that's going to, again, help us to dive into the wait list even further. House Bill 1 also funded some state hospital transition teams, and that's another strategy intended to help us with capacity, looking to have people that are challenging to move, that maybe have been in a hospital. We think they're ready to go, but it's just been difficult to find a place because obviously if they have nowhere to go, they could end up back on the street, back in the court system. And so we're doing a lot of work around that and working with the local authorities as well to help us to identify and move people out that have been had a lot of barriers. And so overall, again, a lot of good news. I think that we're going to continue to see the wait list coming down, and I think we're going to continue to see a lot of this work around the new construction. You already know the Dallas Hospital is in the process of being built as well. That's going to open up a 300-bed facility there. And so we're real excited. Things are going well. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott. I think we need to move on to our next report. That's all great news. So next we have Dr. Martinez from the Haas Foundation.
Thank you, Christy. Great meeting so far. Lots of great information. Hog Foundation, we work more in the mental health ecosystem. So just want to share 3 things with you that's happening. We just finished our Reliable, Flexible Funding for Mental Health and Wellbeing initiative. This is a grant initiative where we're investing over $5.1 million. Grantee partners are going to receive varying award amounts. They're going to range from $25,000 to $250,000. Distributed equally over 5 years. The funding opportunity aims to provide financial support to nonprofits across the whole state of Texas. Our aim is to assist our nonprofit organizations that are doing the hard work on the ground in addressing disparities when it comes to mental health outcomes. The flexible funding is intended to strengthen these organizations as they sustain, deepen, or expand their own operations. So we're not being prescriptive, nor are we micromanaging. We want them to do the great work they're already doing. So by supporting them, we're increasing sustainability for these organizations that are mission aligned with the Foundation's goal to foster really long-term improvements in mental health outcomes for all of our communities that they serve. We've received over 100 proposals from across the state of Texas that were submitted Grant Review Committee has chosen 30. We're in the process of signing statements of agreement, and they will be getting their funding here within the next few months. So a lot of work. Really great to see the enthusiasm out there in our nonprofit organizations. Secondarily, also, we're now in our 7th cohort. For those that are familiar, the Hogg Foundation has a Hogg Academy, and we also fund policy fellows. We're proud to say Judicial Commission on Mental Health has one in this current cohort. So we're talking about the next cohort. This academy, we started it back in 2010, and now we're opening up for the 2024-2026 Policy Fellows Program. The RFP closed just last month on March 11th. We are now in the process of actually going to the Grant Review Committee to determine which of our nonprofits will be receiving a fellow. We fund the entire fellow's salary, we fund the benefits, we also fund a mentor, and we have then an academy that they go to for the next 2 years, which has been really successful. The goal of this initiative is obviously to increase the number and the capacity of individuals and organizations to effectively engage in mental health and substance use policy and advocacy on behalf of the state of Texas, because it's the organizations to do that. We're just providing them the resources to create within their own organizations an individual with policy expertise. This time around, though, we have tweaked it a bit, because before it was pretty much general open, whatever any nonprofit wanted to work on. As we're looking forward and identifying and really going upstream, much as Chief Standridge has mentioned, concentrating more this time around this cohort on really children and youth and their families. So we're piloting a topic-focused policy fellows cohort. We have selected and are going to fund organizations engaged really in state-level policy and advocacy work aimed at supporting children, youth, and like I said, managing mental health and well-being. 10 organizations, a minimum, will be funded. This past cohort, we had 13 because a few come on their own and want to be part of the academy. We would expect that the same thing's going to happen because we're already getting requests for that. We'll be funding at least 10 organizations with 10 fellows going into then the 89th legislative session. And last but not least, we also have one of our signature events going to be happening up at Grapevine, Texas at a Great Wolf Lodge, which is PeerFest 2024. Hopefully, maybe some of you have heard of this. PeerFest is an educational event that we put on for all Texans who have faced mental health challenges and are on a journey to wellness, of the individuals with lived experience. We work with them together to create the educational event. And this time, like I said, it's up in Grapevine. It's going to be April 15th through the 18th. We've based it on the National Peer Run Conference known as Alternatives. If somebody may be familiar with that, but this is our Texas version, which has been extremely successful. And we're proud to now put it on up in North Texas. Registration right now is at 350 and growing, so we're really excited about that. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Christy.
Thank you. Love hearing that innovative ideas. So we have about 30 minutes left and 5 more partners to get through. So if we can keep it to about 5 minutes on the reports, we will all be able to go to lunch on time. So next, we're happy to hear from Yolanda Lewis for the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute.
Thank you, Christy. I'll try to be very quick. I am Yolanda Lewis. I head up our justice and health work, and I'm sharing remarks on behalf of Dr. Keller. The first thing is we're very optimistic and really excited about the last report around construction projects to really build out the inpatient capacity, jail diversion facilities, and crisis units that are impacting communities. We know how important that is and really believe in the work and how impactful it's going to be kind of writ large. On the justice front, we wanted to just kind of mention a couple tools. The first is, as you know, Meadows has been working at a national level to really kind of scale some of the thoughtful work that's happening in the state. One of the major projects that has happened, of course, in Dallas is the creation of the multidisciplinary response teams, which were a collaboration among multiple partners, including law enforcement, the paramedics, licensed mental health professionals, and emergency response agencies to kind of create a co-responder model. The Institute was asked to create an implementation policy brief that would demonstrate the challenges, but also opportunities and recommendations to spread this theory of change that has been successful in Dallas. And I'm happy to report that later this year, one of the national funders will be publishing content around how these programs can be an important asset to communities, really kind of highlighting the work that has been done in Texas. It'll include 6 key conditions to consider for implementation. It will cover some of the accomplishments and challenges in multiple communities, as well as think more strategically about what needs to be in place in order to expand this theory of change. So that's coming soon, and we'll keep you posted on that. I also want to just share with you that kind of this front end approach that we've been talking about on diversion. Meadows is working with several different partners locally to start thinking about how every call, 911 call that involves a mental health emergency is properly identified, triaged, and that individuals are responded to with dignity and effective care. Just as a contextual note, about 66%, national data shows that 66% of call takers have not received any mental health training. And 20% of the calls, up to 20% of the calls that come in have an undercurrent of mental health and substance abuse to them. And so we think it's highly critical for us to be able to really start thinking strategically in Texas around leveraging predictive risk analysis, also thinking about evidence-informed questions that can be integrated as a way of de-escalating these calls and routing people to where they need to go for care. The final thing that I will just mention is that some of our Texas partners, including Meadows, have been invited to have a national conversation around developing a white paper for expungement and records restoration. This is a unique opportunity, a little bit different than what we participated in before, but we think it's a great opportunity to lift some of the important considerations for courts and justice partners as they're thinking about the considerations for people who have mental health concerns and intellectual disabilities that may have criminal histories, and really kind of thinking about what implementation guides need to be in place to help decrease some of the barriers for wellness and safety kind of long term, including their ability to access housing, employment opportunities, and not re-entering the justice system. So if you have ideas or feedback about work that you're doing in your local jurisdiction, we're happy to include that in the conversation that is happening at the national level around records restoration. Thank you, Christy.
Thanks so much. That's exciting. If you are a collaborative council member or a commissioner who has an announcement, I think we're going to be short on time. If you'll drop it into the chat, that might be the most efficient way to do it. Okay, so next we have Dr. Blake Harris.
Good morning, friends, and I will equally try and be brief, so I'll talk fast. Dr. Blake Harris, I'm a forensic psychologist and the director of our Veterans Mental Health Department for the Texas Veterans Commission, which includes our Justice Involved Veteran Program, Suicide Prevention Program, Provider Training, and our Homeless Veteran Initiative, Community and Faith Partnerships, and our Military Veteran Peer Network. Some of the things that are just coming out in advance of each session, there is the Texas Coordinating Council for Veteran Services, which meets interdisciplinary opportunity to provide targeted recommendations to the legislatures on things that can be actionable in advance of the next session. There is a mental health work group, and we've worked with a lot of partners, including some representatives, folks here. The recommendations are still in process, but we have landed our unmet needs, and I will just highlight those briefly. There's continued need for suicide prevention, crisis intervention, and postvention for service members, veterans, and their family members in Texas, especially as we see that the rates of death by suicide for veterans are creeping back up as we look 2 years backwards during the period of COVID. Also, further integration of veteran-specific mental health training and services in local and statewide criminal justice systems to reduce recidivism and help with reentry efforts. We are also dovetailing our efforts with the Criminal Justice Work Group, which is being stewarded by Brandon Wood from Texas Commission on Jail Standards, so that they are complementary in that regard. Also, increased integration of mental health training and support related to preventing homelessness among veterans. So we're also tying in some of the other key stakeholders there, TDHCA, Texas Homeless Network, and other friends and family that we work with. Also, military cultural competent workforce. I think it's been discussed, not only in the judicial realm, but in the mental health and across the board. There is a workforce shortage. So how do we leverage opportunities, including peer services and every opportunity to incentivize folks getting into the workforce, particularly as we look in those areas that are rural and underserved. So of the 254 counties in Texas, I think about 190 are considered rural in some capacity. So we're really trying to get creative there and invite the legislator to assist in those efforts. And lastly, increase peer-based services, really leaning into that military veteran peer network, which is a program that's housed in TVC, but it's also a partnership with the local mental health authorities and has the support of friends like Lee Johnson and the Texas Coordinating Council, and then also our folks at Health and Human Services as well. Some of the other things that came out of the last session that are still in development, there is a Senate Bill 63 caregiver guide for veterans with mental health issues. We are working with Dr. Courtney Harvey's team to co-author that and really make it read, hopefully not like a legislative report and be a user-friendly magazine that can be open to the public, and make sure that that's available online, and hopefully a living document that will continue to update as resources come on board, inviting many state agencies and other partners to be part of that as well. Additionally, we're working with the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, TCOL, to overhaul the 4067 trauma-affected veterans training. Much of my staff does that. We bring in folks on my team who are former law enforcement, also veterans and licensed mental health professionals. We're getting a lot of great feedback, piloting some of those changes, and then that will be the new official curriculum for those courses. Also working with them on advanced training for jailers. Hopefully that will be on demand, because we know shift work is hard to get everyone trained on how to work with veterans when they come into the system, and continuing to work with other partners like Texas Commission on Jail Standards on earlier screening for veteran status upon intake, as we know that opens many other doors for treatment and diversion. Additionally, not to tread ground that's already been done, Christy did a great job outlining the SIM model. We also work as part of the Justice of All Veteran Network at the national level on a veteran SIM map, which is really just focusing on those veteran-specific services and touch points that overlay perfectly with the SIM map that she led with. So we're looking to come alongside efforts of the JCMH for this technical assistance component about those, or if there's zeroing in on a particular intercept. And to that end, we also just did a joint presentation with HHSC's forensic and behavioral health technical assistance to that end. So working with Katie Bialik and Jenny Simpson as well, so that we can jump in as those SEMs on the veteran specific component, and work smarter, not harder. Additionally, we just completed our conference, and we had an opportunity there to recognize the role of municipal judges. So actually, Judge Bonnie Townsend received an award for us for some of the great work and initiative that she's doing, and helping to work with other municipal judges so that we can provide them resources that they can further help get folks lined into those services early. Definitely one of those leaning into our military veteran peer network. So we're hoping to develop some bench cards and some quick cheat sheets that can help align services on the front end. And I know I had one or two other things, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if there's any other follow-up or anything that relates with veterans' mental health, please let us know. Lastly, I will highlight that, as was said, the interim charges have come out. There are 3 for the Veterans Affairs Committee that are very pertinent, relevant to us, and certainly other stakeholders here as well. An evaluation of the mental health services across the state that are being provided by the state agencies, and then also those who we liaison. So we expect to be roll up our sleeves, work very closely, certainly with Dr. Courtney Harvey and other folks as well. Support service database and data sharing for veteran services across the state. And then there's one focusing in on veteran housing and homelessness prevention. So we're also very excited about that. And lastly, I will say, we're working very closely with April Zamora and her team to strengthen some of the veteran services that are happening within TDCJ, and we're very excited about that, ramping those services up over the coming months. With that, I will take a breath and close.
Thank you. I love to hear those cross collaborations. Next, Chandra Carter from TJJD.
Good morning, everybody. I put a little note in there about our new builds. We were allocated 200 million. The TFC study gave us our areas where to move forward. We again didn't choose the locations, and of the locations identified, we have to work with the LBB to identify how to move forward. We do anticipate 2 builds, one for violent offenders, one for mental health youth. The mental health build we are hoping will serve both state and county kids, so that the counties don't have to commit the youth to get the level of service that we need. But we're still in the place of property has not even been secured. So by the time session starts, we certainly will not have broken ground. It's a long process. I'm sure everybody can understand. Our wait list is going up. We anticipated it going up. So last session, we were given money for funding, for staffing, and that money did what it was supposed to. We are actually, our census is 140 youth higher today than it was last year at this time. And so we had essentially absorbed that existing wait list. What we hadn't anticipated was a collapse in contract care. Our contract care providers are no longer able to serve just the level of acuity of youth coming into TJJD. It's probably no surprise that we're seeing a really just crazy increase in the combination of need for a high mental health treatment along with violent offender treatment. And that means that their treatment is more intense and stays longer. So the process of our back door is a little slower. And everybody knows, what happened last session with us overcrowding. So it is a balance of where should the risk be. And we're really conservative on that back door, really mindful about public safety and community safety. But we're working collaboratively with our partners. I do want to say our county partners are diverting every kid they possibly can, and the youth that are coming to us are 99.9% of the time completely appropriate for the level of service that we provide in TJJD. We are working on a new sort of Texas model approach. We started with trust-based relational intervention. We're now adding a level of dialectical behavior therapy, which we're excited about, and really hopes turn us from an outpatient model to an inpatient model and moves youth through more effectively. We are got our first draft of our LAR together, and one of the efforts that we're working on is what we're calling risk-based funding. And essentially that's trying to make clear that a general population kid doesn't cost us as much as a really chronically and acutely mentally ill kid or an incredibly aggressive and violent kid. They just need more resources, more services. So we're trying to tier that out just to make clear what the needs of our population are. And we are collaborating with DFPS, HHSC, Colcorst, and the governor's office is bringing us together. There's an identified group of youth that really bounce from all of our systems. None of us were designed to care for a youth that, there's just a lack of behavioral and mental health resources in the community. Parents are overwhelmed and are unable to safely provide supervision and care for youth. And so they bounce between us. And so we're really trying to be coming together collaboratively to come up with a solution. And I do want to give a shout out to my DFPS partners. Their CWAP list, y'all, has dropped so significantly. They are doing amazing work. I know they get a lot of flack and they're under a lot of pressure, but holy cow, kudos to them. I'm super proud to be partnering with them. And if anybody has any questions about any of the things that I mentioned, you can just message me directly in the chat.
Thank you so much. And we all appreciate those positive kudos. So next we have April Zamora with Takumi.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I'm working from home and I've been having some trouble with my computer, so I'm trying to do it from my phone, but I don't have a lot of updates today. We are anxiously working on our LAR. And so trying to think through, I know everybody's talked jail diversion. And so when we think of our programs, we honestly have really approached it like the chief talked about earlier. Most of our people that we work with we look at mental health diversion. We know they're already in jail. They're high-level felony defendants who have already entered the jail system. But what we're looking at is how to divert them from going into our prison system. What we do know is that, and I'm looking at Judge Carr, he had one of the most successful mental health courts. And we know that if we can get somebody prioritized onto a probation caseload and get them effective treatment, we can keep them out of the prison system. And that's what we're going to be trying to look towards, because we now have an emerging population in our prison system of over 35,000 on our mental health caseloads. So that certainly is problematic for our prison system, in the sense that we have an overwhelming population of people in prison with severe or persistent mental illnesses. You really have to look at what went wrong at the front end of the system, or what could we do better at the front end of the system to ensure that we're adequately treating people in the right way before they become part of our prison system. So, Christy, we're working feverishly, if you will, to try and figure out the appropriate solutions. So our Tacoma Advisory Committee has been going on field trips, for lack of a better word. They were graciously hosted at Russ State Hospital. We went over to our Skyview unit, which is our inpatient mental health facility. Denise Onken and her group graciously hosted us in Houston, so we could look at different diversion centers. So thinking through all of the possibilities of what Tacoma funding could look like in the future and how we should address and think through true mental health diversion. I loved what the chief had to say about how do we help officers access information. So in every meeting that we are going to, one of the things we are talking about is TDCJ is under sunset. So taking a good approach with sunset at our enabling legislation and making sure that Health and Safety Code 614 is accurate and up to date, and making sure that we have everything that we need to do in our enabling legislation there. You heard from Dr. Harris about our work that we're doing with him. So one of the things that we want to make sure to do is get Texas Veterans Commission as part of our enabling legislation to make sure information sharing is adequately handled with them. So that is my quick down and dirty update. So I'm sorry about that. I flew in last night, so you got a little bit of a quick down and dirty update from Tacoma, but there's some great information being shared. And what I'd really love is there's a number of you have kind of started emailing to see if we can get you to come stop by the Tacoma Advisory Committee, because there's quite a bit of overlap, and make sure that we're just cross-educating. Certainly we have some of you on the advisory committee, but I think it would be help if we start consolidating our efforts and marching in the same direction going into session.
Thank you so much. And it is an overwhelming amount of information. So that's why we are the scribes at the JCMH, and we will write all of this down and organize it and keep it so that we can learn from what we've been doing in the past. Okay, and last but not least, Brandon Wood.
Thank you. Brandon Wood, Executive Director of Texas Commission on Jail Standards. I will be brief. I wanted to update the Commission on the fact that the Commission on Jail Standards is utilizing a statutorily mandated advisory committee dealing with individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. I believe that y'all received the briefing from Ron's team with the governor's office, and we were lucky enough to have him present briefly at the previous meeting, and then he gave us the full spiel at this last meeting, and he brought up a lot of good points, which resulted in quite a bit of discussion. And I think one of the things that some of the members took from it, especially a former county judge, is that we have got to have more outreach to county judges who fill so many of the roles and can be the coordinator at the local level when it comes to mental health and inmates with IDD. So that was pretty exciting, to be honest with you, because when you have individuals with his knowledge of the system pointing that out, we definitely have taken advantage of that and made contact with the Texas Association of Counties and set up a meeting to possibly start doing a little bit more outreach and a training program for the county judges regarding that specific issue. Other items that we are looking at and working on is basically updating the current screening form that is in use across the state of Texas that assists the county jailers in identifying individuals with potential mental health or IDD issues. That is worked in conjunction with the CARE CCQ check that a couple of members have mentioned earlier today. And we are in the process and we'll be looking at how to update that and make it more effective. If anybody would be interested in weighing in on that, participating, please reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to include you in those discussions and conversations. I also like to point out that SIM mapping has been mentioned a couple of times, and I have been out trying to sell that as well, because I believe that all too often we run across the fact that we have leaders within the community that simply do not know what is available within their own community, and trying to assist them in connecting the dots is, I think, one of the things that y'all are doing a great job on. So if y'all get overwhelmed within the next couple of months, I'm not going to apologize. Sorry. So anyway, again, great presentation by Ron's team. I will echo what Chief Stanridge mentioned regarding the fact that the first time that we often have awareness of an individual making contact with the criminal justice system with mental illness is when they get to the jail. And anytime that we can get that information out sooner and quicker so that they can make better decisions, we can actually start doing jail diversion and not simply pre-trial diversion. There's a big distinction, and I think that everybody in this committee knows that and recognizes it, and we definitely want to be ones that continue to advocate for that as well. Dr. Harris mentioned the fact that the Texas Coordinating Council for Veteran Services is working on several issues, and there is some cross-pollination between my criminal justice work group and his mental health work group, and we continue to look at options and information specifically on the veterans treatment courts and trying to find out if we can assist them in putting forward possibly some standardized metrics or recidivism rate. And we had a really good discussion about 2 weeks ago on shifting the unmet need that will be included in that legislative report. And we are finalizing the wording on that now. So with that, I'm not going to take up any more of the commission's time. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you all the brief update.
Thank you. And I think a lot of ears perked up when you said recidivism rate metrics. So you may get the favor returned to you with a lot of phone calls.
Okay, well, come with solutions, not problems.
Justice Bland, Judge Hervey.
Are there announcements? No? Well, oh.
Yes, Judge, I believe that everyone has dropped the announcements into the chat, unless there's someone.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, then with that, we really thank everybody for being here today. And we will meet again Wednesday, November 20th in Allen, Texas, prior to the summit. So thank you. Good job, Christy and staff, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.